Jarquez Hunter is back. What does that mean for the Auburn Tigers?
Freezing temperatures are likely for several hours inland and a few hours closer to the coast.
Yahtzee.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Joining us today, Justin Hokanson of AuburnLive.com, part of On3, hanging out with us as we are in the thick of fall camp. And as we walked out in the open viewing window yesterday, Hoke, the biggest story, the biggest question people have been asking outside of quarterback, when would Jarquez Hunter return? Well, he was back yesterday. And I think that's kind of a step in the right direction for this Auburn offense.
Yeah, it was good to see him back out there so we can get that question answered. I mean, I think we thought he would be out there. A little surprised maybe he wasn't out there when they started camp, but we were just kind of waiting on when he would be back out there. And so seeing him back out there practice, right back in the mix of it, was a good first step. Mm-hmm. Now we just wait. Now we just wait and see if he suits up and plays against UMass. Because I think that's my next question. He clearly was held out for a reason. So now the question will be asked of you, and he'll say the same thing. We don't discuss, university policies and procedures and on and on. So we're not going to know until, that first game and whether he comes out there and plays or not. And then this will drag on because if he doesn't play, we'll ask, is he going to play? And he'll go, I don't discuss, so here we go.
Yeah. But, he's really set himself up. Like, I assume somebody will ask the question, but there's a chance they don't because we all know what he's going to say anyway. It's kind of a waste of a question.
Well, good to have him back out there. You talked to some of the players, and they said, the players were pumped. DJ James was excited to have him back out there. Tate Johnson was excited to have him back out there. So, he's clearly a liked teammate, an energized, a guy that brings a lot of energy, plays hard. He's a fantastic football player. Yeah. So good to have him back out there at practice, raises the level of competition and just gives the offense a little bit of a pop out there.
Yeah. And it sounds like he broke a big run. It sounds like he didn't miss a step with this missed time, kind of starting fall camp a little bit later than everybody else. Sounds like he was hard to bring down. Talked to folks afterwards, as well as, with the media session with some of the players, they talked about how he looked good and was moving well. And so that's certainly something that's encouraging. Staying on the topic of running backs, though, Hoke, I also was told Sean Jackson had a great day. Does that matter? Does Sean Jackson crack the rotation? I don't know, but it is worth noting nonetheless, maybe a goal line back or something. The other big story that we saw once we stepped out there, after we got past, we saw 27 running around toting the rock, was who was handing him the rock originally with the starters, and that was Robby Ashford. He was the first quarterback up in the viewing session that we saw. And Hoke, what is your takeaway from that?
That the quarterbacks will continue to rotate through, which we've mentioned, I don't know, people are at AuburnLive.com when they read our practice observations, things like that. Like, I always try to caveat what we see with, we're seeing a select time period, first of all. Second of all, we're seeing drills and we're seeing different guys and go through these drills, and different guys get reps with the 1s, 2s, and 3s. Not to mention Hugh Freeze and Philip Montgomery are both on record saying guys are going to rotate. So, even when we were talking about Peyton Thorns being with the 1, I think Peyton Thorns being with the 1s on Thursday is more significant because he's the new guy. And it's day 1. And when we walked out there on Thursday, he was taking reps with the 1s. That's significant, more so than Robby taking reps with the 1s today. Robby was here in the spring. He knows the offense. He should take some of those. Peyton already being there, to me, was almost a little bit more noteworthy than Robby doing it. But not surprising. Look, they're going to rotate. These guys are going to rotate through and try to hand off to the number 1 running back or play a little bit behind the number 1 offensive line, throw to the better receivers. That's going to happen for the first handful of practices. And then the goal will be narrowing this thing down. Mm-hmm. There's so much we don't see. There's so much work that the real work is happening. We're not seeing that. The stuff that's really going to separate these guys. A lot of it anyway, we're not seeing. So we don't know what's happening in the film room and studying and grading the guys on film and what's going into there. What coaches are seeing from a leadership standpoint in the locker room after practices. We don't see any of that. We know that's important. So
yeah,
there's a lot of variables here, but not surprised that Robby got a little bit of that time with the ones. Hugh said he's throwing the ball a little bit better. That's good. And I think we all think Robby will be a part of this offense some way, somehow, regardless of, whatever, if he wins the job or not. Somehow, some way he'll be a part of package or, different circumstances or whatever. But
yeah,
not
I talked to somebody who was, at all of practice today, and they said that Robby was with the ones more than anybody else for the remainder of practice, not just a 30-minute window that we got, but also that it was probably the best throwing in a practice that he's seen out of Robby. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I think he's making progress. And again, with Robby, he's got the arm, and at times he throws the ball well. It's consistency. There were times last fall when Robby would have a good practice, but then Robby would come back the next fall practice and he'd complete 30% of his passes. And then he'd come back the next practice and complete 30% of his passes. And then he'd come back and have a good day. It was just like this with Robby. And so that's the thing is, can he come back? Can he consistently through fall camp, when you look up after 2+ weeks and you're charting every throw, can you look up and say Robby completed 58%? Throughout fall camp? I think that would be a step in the right direction for him. Or are you going to look at it and go, yeah, he had a day where he completed 60 and he had a day where he completed 20.
Right. I mean, it seems like he's a lot more polished than he was in the spring, but we'll see. Like you said, it's only been a few practices so far, but good for Robby for that improvement. Holden Gariner has been with the ones in every practice that we've been able to see as this rotation starts to happen. That's probably the biggest surprise of the quarterback room for me. I just did not expect him to actually be in this race, Hoke. And I think he actually is in this race up to this point.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. of him. I mean, he's got the size. He throws a good ball. The one question I have with him is a mobility question, and that is, in this offense, how does that factor in? Because he's not mobile. I mean, it's not his strong suit. And so when you have an RPO offense where you at least need a threat, if you're doing this zone read type stuff, there's got to be just the threat that the quarterback can pull it. And if that's not a threat with Holden, then you better have an elite offensive line, or he better make up for it by being an elite passer that makes elite decisions, knowing there's no threat to run and that the defense doesn't have to respect that. You have to make up for it somewhere. And so I'm curious about Holden's ability to run or not inability to run and kind of where he makes up for that. But it's good to hear that he's making progress for sure. I mean, there needs to be competition. I said this on our board the other day. Handing the keys to Peyton Thorne does nobody any good. Holden in there competing, that's good. Robby in there having a couple good days, that's good. That's a good thing no matter what. If you look up at the end of the day, if Peyton Thorne wins the job, but you had these guys push him, that's a great thing. Or if these guys are in the mix, because I think some people are going to hear that and hear Garner or Ashford are in the mix, and they're going to be like, oh, great.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line is, Hoke, is like a year ago, all three of these options are better than any option Auburn had at quarterback a year ago.
Yeah.
And that's a great situation to be in.
Yeah. You're going the right direction.
Now, granted, the bar from a year ago, that's not the bar you want to be at, but still, I think Auburn, all three of these options are better than, TJ, Calzada, and then Robby that was a year ago, because I think Robby's better now than he was certainly a year ago.
And the other factor of that is, just real quick, when we're talking about Robby and Garner, and part of this we don't know because I'm not in the film room and I'm not in there. But the other part of this is, it's Hugh Freeze, Kent Austin, and Philip Montgomery coaching these quarterbacks. It's not Eric Keesaw and Brian Harsin. Right. So, I mean, to me, the coaching and the development they're getting now is better. Yeah. And so hopefully that means that what you're hearing when you're hearing these positive things, hopefully it's not a repeat of maybe some them showing some flashes last year. Hopefully they're actually making really good strides under these new guys too.
Yep. All right, let's discuss some other potential standouts as well as some notes that we observed or heard about Auburn's practice yesterday. But first, today's show is brought to you by our friends at Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs make you look good. Bird Dogs stretch. They're khaki shorts that are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and give your leg a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better, and they fit better than regular shorts that are made of stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs are where it's at. I wear my Bird Dogs everywhere. They just recently sent me another package. I'm wearing some of them now. I wore them to practice yesterday. I wear them all over the place. They also sent me some pants. I haven't tried them on yet, but very excited because I know I'm going to look great in those pants and shorts as well. So head over to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege to enter promo code LockedOnCollege, and you'll get a free white tech hat with your order. It's very clean. I got one. I'll wear it on the podcast later this week. But that's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege or promo code LockedOnCollege, no spaces, for a free white tech hat. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Justin Hokanson joining us of AuburnLive.com, part of On3. So a few notes from Auburn's practice yesterday that stood out to me. And let's start on the defensive front, Hoke, because I think that's interesting. So the starting defensive line as of yesterday, and of course, this is all kind of constantly moving, but I love the idea of this defensive line because my biggest concern with this team outside of wide receiver is pass rush. Rushing the passer is something I'm concerned about. And so the starting defensive line yesterday was Keldrick Falk at defensive end, Jason Jones at nose guard, Marcus Harris at defensive tackle /3 technique, and then Jaden McLeod got the starting nod in the jack room, which is pretty surprising to me. I thought he'd be more of a pass rush specialist, third down guy, but I love the upside that Jaden McLeod brings. And I don't know about you, Hoke, but anytime I talk to somebody within the program about McLeod, he's constantly impressing people with his motor.
Yeah, I think it's just you're not really going to be able to keep him down. He's too talented, and he's too gifted certainly as a pass rusher, even as an overall player. He's going to be, I think he's going to be the primary jack. But I do think McAllister has a role. I do think Steven Sings has a role. I think those guys have a role in this defense. But McLeod's going to have to be the difference maker. And so seeing him in there, that's good. Keldrick Falk is interesting. Big boy. It's just for a true freshman, a lot of responsibility is going to be on him. It is hard to play offensive or defensive line as a true freshman in the SEC. If you can do that, you're really good. So there's going to be a lot of responsibility on him. I'm curious to see his development, but that's interesting and exciting. McLeod's going to be the guy, though. I remember being on a show in the summer and we were talking about transfers, and I'm like, McLeod is the guy that I think just continues to not get mentioned enough because it's what you said, that it's not just that he's a good player. It's that he's a player at an absolute position of need that can there's nobody, I'll put it this way. There's nobody on Auburn's roster like McLeod. That makes him really, really, really unique and important to pressuring the quarterback. They don't have another one of him. They don't.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if he doesn't lead Auburn in sacks at this point, right?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, that'd be my bet. I don't know where else you'd go.
Maybe Marcus Harris is probably the only other one, but if it seems like in the spring they're putting him more at defensive tackle than a defensive end, which surprises me a little bit. But I think that shows that they like Keldrick Falk at defensive end, and they like Messiah Nasili Kite at defensive end as well. And so you scoop Marcus Harris in. It makes sense. I just wasn't really expecting it.
Yeah. And that's another kid, Nasili Kite from Maryland, who half the Auburn fans, maybe more, probably to this day, we're in August, they probably still don't know who that guy is. If you just mentioned his name, they'd be like, who? They probably, there's just, he's one of those guys in that transfer class that I think got lost in the shuffle. But he's a really good player, and he'll be an important player.
And he was in that wave in December where we added like 8 guys in like 3 or 4 days. I mean, there was just a lot going on in that transfer window. At least McLeod was kind of by himself a little bit as far as when the news was dropping. But I was surprised by that they would give the nod to McLeod over Elijah McAllister. And obviously, this is just kind of the way they lined up yesterday and how they went through practice yesterday. But a little surprised because Elijah McAllister looks more like a defensive end than a jack linebacker to me.
Yeah.
But, and they're moving Keldrick to defensive end instead of Jack. So I am curious if that influences how they use Elijah at all, because they have a look, right? And like Steven Sings is that look of, okay, that makes sense. He's got a similar build to Jaden McLeod. Do you put Elijah in rushing downs? Like I'm genuinely curious to see how that looks this fall.
Yeah. And McAllister's I look at Elijah McAllister as one of those guys that is going to do the right things. He's going to be reliable. He's got the body. Yeah. But if you look at him, he wasn't overly productive at Vanderbilt. He wasn't like a stud. I mean, he was just a guy who played 4 years. And
he's got like 1,000 snaps and like not a sack. I mean, that's a little
ton of experience. Good, but has all the intangibles. And when you're Auburn, you're going, we have nobody at the position. So if somebody like that, we will take him. So I see him as a solid, reliable guy that's got the body, that's got the maturity, that's got the smarts, all that good stuff. But I don't see him as a guy that he could start some games, but I don't see him as a massive difference maker. I think he's a solid body they needed. I think McLeod is the difference maker.
Yeah. Another note that I got yesterday, it sounds like at linebacker, Austin Keys and Eugene Asante were the starting linebackers as of practice yesterday. And it seems like it's always Austin Keys and someone. I think early, the first two open windows we got, it was Keys and Cam Riley. And now it's Eugene Asante. And look, I like Eugene Asante a lot, Hoke, but it sounds like they had a good practice yesterday, the two of them.
Yeah, the Asante thing is surprising to me.
Is it?
Because he looks the part, but I mean, I just remember last year he comes from North Carolina and he did absolutely nothing, to the point that at one point late last year he was on the scout team. I mean, I was being told, watch out for him potentially to transfer before the season was even done. I mean, he was on the scout team while the season was still going on, and I'm thinking, man, that guy transferred here, and he's making such a little impact that he's on the scout team.
That was a lot of personal stuff, with family passing and stuff.
He did. So I guess just to then hear him now talking about being a starter, that's what a jump. What a jump from end of last fall to now. And we're talking about this guy. And so I don't know. I'm curious to see. I'd like to. I mean, I won't really know until we see him in a game. I'm curious to see him a little bit next to Keys or Cam Riley, just see what he's all about. Because, athletically, he looks the part. He's a beast. He's fast. I mean, he's got the skills, which is maybe why I was a little confused last year at why he just was a non-factor for even before the season. I mean, just even early in the season, he was just kind of out of it. But interesting to see him in there. Riley, Keys, I think Wesley Steiner to me has slipped.
Okay.
He's been a little banged up, but I just think he's going to slip in this rotation. I think you bring in Larry Nixon for a reason. You bring in Austin Keys for a reason. I think Wesley Steiner is going to slip a little bit in this race, and I think Larry Nixon, Asante, Robert Woodyard's another guy that I want to hear more about development. He looks the part, but Ron Roberts, the other day said the next 10 days are going to be big for Woodyard. That kind of made me feel like they need to see more from him. It was almost like, hey, you got these next 10 days are big for you, and you got to make some strides. And so I'm interested to see what Woodyard can do, and if he can stay in the top half versus the bottom half of that maybe linebacker rotation or how that works out. But I think Asante, Woodyard, Nixon, those are kind of the three guys I'm trying to figure out where they fall into place.
Sounds like a wide receiver had a good day in practice yesterday. We'll see what Hoke heard about it in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 favorite sportsbook. And look, we all know it. Football season's about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. They've got a ton of stuff over at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. Justin Hokanson with AuburnLive.com. Sounds like Jair Shorter had a solid day and is working in more and more with the ones, because really the only receivers we see with the ones are the same three every time. And obviously they're going to rotate more than three guys in, but it's been Nick Martner, Camden Brown, and Jay Fair, who Jay Fair is apparently having a heck of a fall camp. But sounds like Jair Shorter made some plays yesterday, and he and Shane Hooks are kind of the two guys that this offensive staff's probably banking on them stepping up over the course of fall camp. And it's nice to hear that that's starting to happen potentially.
Yeah, those two guys, they have to. Because they're just so unique. I mean, Jair Shorter, people will see if they, I don't know when, I can't remember when fan day is, but when people come to fan day, if not, when people come to that first game, and you see Jair Shorter, he is a beast. He's a tight end. I mean, he's an undersized tight end, or certainly an oversized receiver. He's a big guy, well-built guy. And then Shane Hooks has got the height. He's a more lean player. Jair Shorter is just filled out 6'4.5", 6'5", whatever he is. Those guys, you don't just find guys like that. And so I think those two guys are going to have to step up. I'm curious to see sort of how they use them. They got to keep Shorter healthy. He's been banged up at North Texas for a couple years prior. So got to keep him healthy. But yeah, him and Hooks, you start thinking about situational, whether it's red zone, whether it's 3rd and 7, and you've got options like Hooks, Shorter, Fairweather. I mean, that's a lot of height and a lot of size and a lot of range that you don't have to be super, super accurate throwing the football to those three guys, the type of catch radius that those guys have. And so, man, you start to have some really big options to throw the football to that they haven't had. I don't know, I guess maybe since Seth Williams was probably the last guy that you thought about that you could just sort of get it near. And then, Jay Fair, dude. Jay Fair, I love that kid.
He's eating right now, man.
He's crushing it. And I remember just talking to him as a recruit. He's such a nice kid, great family, head on his shoulders. Like, he's just got it together. And so, hearing him coming on is probably not all that surprising. The other guy that we saw with the ones recently in practice was Amari Kelly. And that's a guy that we've talked about that I'm just kind of curious how he can fit into the mix. You look back now and you think Amari Kelly, Jay Fair, Camden Brown. We'll see how Camden Brown kind of does, but we'll see. Maybe Harsin and his guys nailed a couple of receiver prospects here with all three of those guys. But certainly Kelly and Fair and Brown, really all three of them are trending in the right direction. Kelly's another guy I want to see how he can get into the mix this fall.
Those three guys, Jarquez Hunter, a few fruits that rose up during the potato famine. Any other guys, as far as it could be either side of the football, that you're hearing good things about, or they've impressed you, whether it's just physically or their actual play over fall camp so far, Hoke?
I like some of the potential of Xavier Miller at tackle. He's played a lot of backup right tackle, I think. I'm watching. My head is spinning from the numbers.
Yeah, he's behind Gunnar Britton. Yep.
So he's a guy that I think's done well at that backup tackle spot as they try to build that depth. I think we feel decent about maybe them finding that 5, but Xavier Miller could be a guy. Connor Liu, you hear great things. So the depth is starting to build. But Xavier Miller is a guy that I think's got a really bright future.
Hey, speaking of backup offensive line, we saw Dylan Cinda, the former Northwestern guy that transferred like 3 days ago. It seems like he was with the Twos yesterday. That was good to see.
Yeah, that was really interesting. He's a big boy, and so that might just be one that fell into Auburn's lap. Man, that's a really wild scenario when we look back. But yeah, Xavier Miller's a guy to me to watch a little bit at that tackle spot, see if he can make a push. And then another guy would be. He's not talked about, I don't want to talk about it. This guy's not going to start, but I don't think people really know at all who Champ Anthony is. And Champ Anthony's a JUCO kid that they brought in under the radar, came from Texas. He's over there backing up BJ James, and I just think he's a player to watch out for, to be an important part of the rotation and get snaps. all the focus is on all these freshman DBs they brought in. Kayan Lee, obviously, JD Rim, who's a sophomore, but Champ Anthony's a guy that could see the field at times and is just kind of a guy that's forgotten about a little bit, that seems to be improving day by day. And he's another guy just to kind of go look up and keep an eye on his development.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it, because I haven't really talked about him at all since, the show after he committed. And in fact, when I talked about him, I was like, I don't think he's a this year kind of guy, but he might be. I could be totally wrong on that. I could see him getting the rotation. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. And probably play special teams too. He's probably a great special teams player as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wondering how many of these receivers, how many of these young DBs get in on the special teams. We got to see a little bit of that. Who do you think will be the punt returner?
Well, probably Jarquez Johnson, right?
Yeah, that would make some sense. We saw a little bit of that, so I was just curious. We got to see a little bit of punt returner. Jarquez, Caleb Burton, Keontae Scott, Jay Fair. Yeah, Jarquez makes a lot of sense.
Are you surprised with how little we've heard of Jarquez as a receiver?
Yeah.
I am too.
Very surprised. I mean, he's the most proven receiver on the team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he just didn't get his chances the last couple of years. They didn't target him enough. But when he got a chance to get targeted, he made big plays downfield. And of this group of receivers, he's probably got the best resume in terms of stats. He can really get down the field and stretch the field. So yeah, it's surprising. I mean, I think that's maybe more of a credit to Jay Fair and the job Jay Fair has done in that slot position. But you'll see. I would imagine you'll see both those guys a ton. Jarquez and Jay Fair will play a ton. The way the tempo that they're going to run at, this isn't going to be just kind of three main receivers. There's going to be a good amount of rotation.
Do you think Jarquez is ahead of Caleb Burton? Because right now I don't think he is.
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, the from what we've seen combined with what we've heard about Caleb Burton.
Yeah, I've just heard nothing about Jarquez Johnson.
Yeah, I don't know where he's at. And Burton, that would be a little, Burton's a guy that I thought was coming in like, okay, he doesn't have any college experience. He sat out. He's a future guy. But man, that dude is apparently an absolute beast when it comes to work ethic. And I think he's made up a lot of ground in that regard. So yeah, it's the Jarquez one's interesting, man. But I mean, look, think back. I mean, he almost left, right? And then he decided to come back. I don't know. Maybe something's going on there that he's got to battle through. Maybe there's a lot of competition that maybe he thought he would be at the top of the line and he's not. And he's got to battle through some things. I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, haven't seen him out there amongst the ones. And the media, we haven't really asked about Jarquez. To be fair, we've asked about guys we don't know as much about, young guys. So we haven't specifically asked Philip Montgomery, hey, what about Jarquez Johnson? So that's kind of on us that maybe from a public standpoint. But yeah, I'm a little surprised that he seems to just sort of be in the mix and not be the guy.
Yeah, surprising me as well. Hoke, you're putting out a crazy amount of content right now, you and your staff. How can people check it all out?
AuburnLive.com. There's a $1 for 1 month deal going on that wasn't my idea because that doesn't make me any money really. But the people at On3 thought it was a good idea. And so I don't know how long that'll last, but go jump on that. $1 gets you a month. That gets you all fall camp leading up to the first game. Just pay $1. So I don't know. If you don't take advantage of that, I can't help you, man. So go jump on that, auburnlive.com. That would be
there'll be some commits during that month as well. Yes. And Cole will drop his deep dive on all of those guys too. It's worth it. Yeah, auburnlive.com. All right, be sure to come back tomorrow for more Auburn goodness. Until then, this has been Locked On Auburn.